All right. So our first topic today is about the Meta antitrust trial that is getting started. So let's talk about a little bit of context here. Last week, former Meta executive Sarah Wynn-Williams delivered an explosive testimony before the US Senate Judiciary Committee, accusing Meta of prioritizing profits over safety for its youngest users. She alleged that Meta exploited the emotional vulnerabilities of teens aged 13 to 17 using behavioral cues such as deleting selfies to target them with ads for beauty and weight loss. She said that Meta executives, including Zuckerberg, were aware of these things and the psychological harm they were causing and chose not to veto these measures. She also accused them of compromising US national security by collaborating with the Chinese Communist Party. According to her testimony, they developed censorship tools for China and shared AI technologies that may have bolstered China's military capabilities. Specifically, she was saying that the party asked for this kind of editorial rights over posts that hit 10,000 views, and there was this kind of master editor, and that the party could deprioritize or de-emphasize posts. They could shut the whole system down on sensitive days like Tiananmen Square and so on. And the accusations are money over good judgment, over national security, over children's safety. So yeah, this is all kicked off in earnest, and it's a big deal. Meta stock is hurting bad, while some of the Mag 7 have rebounded a little, not rebounded, but are inching their way up. Meta feels like it's sort of going nowhere or even going down. What do you make of this, Yaniv?
A couple of things. First of all, I'm not quite sure what this has to do with antitrust. Like, basically, all of those allegations. And by the way, Sarah Wynn-Williams is also the person who very recently published a memoir of her time at Facebook called Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and lost idealism. So, I think that's probably why she was brought up there. So yes, I don't know what it has to do with antitrust. What it makes it clear is that Facebook and Meta are a bunch of scumbags, which, personally, I feel I already knew. I know, Chris, you and I have crossed swords on that one a little bit in the past, but, I think it's a company that is not particularly ethical and that was very, very focused on growth at all costs and saw anything that was an impediment to growth as something to be dealt with, as opposed to, something that maybe there's a time where you sort of stop and consider what your values are and what actually matters to do good in the world, and anything like that. It's just like, okay, how do we make the number go up and to the right? And, credit where it's due. On that metric, they're incredible, right? So all of these things, I would say that all these allegations are, if you view it through a completely amoral lens, as simply business problems to be solved, they made good decisions and they went ahead and solved them. But that doesn't make it okay, right? It's really a moral argument more than anything else.
Yeah, so I saw a few seconds of testimony on this where she was talking about China and about their willingness to work with the Chinese government to create these censorship tools and so on. On that front, at least, I haven't heard testimony about the kids stuff, and so to the degree that that's true, it's disgusting and unforgivable and inexcusable. On the China one, I was less convinced. There's a little bit of like, company trying to grow, company conforming to local laws. Next up, water is wet. Breaking news at 7. I often am skeptical about when you put things in kind of with dramatic music and put them in a hearing, they always seem like they're bad by default. The Chinese Communist Party is bad and their surveillance apparatus is bad. Having to exist in China following those rules is bad. But if you want to exist in China, you've got to play by those rules. And it's completely unsurprising that they would be trying to play by those rules to exist in China. It just seems like one of those things of like, no shit. I think where it becomes more explicitly like they broke the law is when they testified in front of Congress that they were not doing those things, that they were not in conversations with China, and they were not in conversations about moderating speech and implementing, quote unquote, backdoors for those kind of tools for the Communist Party. They were not putting US data in China sovereignty, which it remains to be seen if that was actually happening. There's a striation here, right? Like harming kids, knowing you're harming kids, targeting them with beauty ads when they're deleting selfies. Bad, disgusting. They should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. building moderation tools and state control tools to exist in China. No shit. That's what they do. That's how you exist in China. And if you want, and anyone who's in China is playing that game. Lying to Congress or leaking US citizen data to China, bad, go to jail. So, it's just, pick your battle, pick your specific thing, and just we just got to be nuanced about that. When I've defended Facebook in the past and Mark Zuckerberg in the past, I've defended it from the point of view of, you can see how Elon Musk behaves, putting his thumb on the scales, promoting right-wing content, deleting all kind of moderations and community standards, being basically a disgusting pig. And you can see what Mark Zuckerberg's done, which is to be neutral, to try to have surgical fact-checking from third parties, to not overreact for the left, where you actually trying to censor people on the left, and although in some cases they took stuff down now that it's been revealed, or promoting disgusting stuff on the right. And so by that standard, I think he's been a much more nuanced and careful steward of the Facebook community. And I think raking them over the coals for that, and not Fox News or the lack of action by Congress, I think is double standards and red herrings and is a problematic. But this kind of stuff, creating harm for kids or, putting US citizen data at risk it's a different class of thing, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's, what sort of reminds me of cigarette companies and that sort of thing. I don't know what the solution is, right? Because, capitalists gonna capitalist. That's sort of the point of a company, right? Their KPI is to make money, no matter what, right? They're very good at doing that. And Facebook is generationally good at doing that. And then it is the role of government in a well-regulated capitalist system to make sure that these companies cannot do harm. But I think it's particularly difficult when you're in an industry that I would call a vice industry, right? Which is when you are giving people harmful things that they want, cigarettes, alcohol. And I would say for certain categories of people, social media that is not good for them, but that they're very engaged with and that they keep coming back for. And so, I think what happened is Facebook found themselves in the vice industry accidentally. I don't think they meant to. They're just, teenage girls and, whatever other vulnerable cohorts discovered Facebook. And, the algorithms and just the sheer grinding logic of capitalism moved things in the direction of you increase engagement by increasing the sort of harmful, addictive behavior on the platform. And the question is, yes, what's the role of government? And I think, Chris, you're right to pinpoint that the real failure of Facebook is when they started to lie about it, right? That's the unforgivable bit. In the same way that cigarette companies, where did they lose any moral standing? Is when they started to lie and actively pursue disinformation campaigns about the harms of cigarettes. Until then, they were just doing what any company would do. But if you start to lie about the harm that you cause, then that is a very, very dark path.
The distinction I've always drawn is, cigarettes have zero social good, right? They're literally just.
I think a lot of smokers would disagree with you on that.
Well, they're just wrong. They're cancer sticks. They harm them. They harm people, and they harm the people smoking, and they harm the people around them. There is no social good to smoking. Period. Full stop. I mean, you can argue with me about that in the comments. I don't care. And the difference with Facebook is Facebook has also been instrumental in organizing social movements, in Black Lives Matter and Me Too, and enabling people to connect and to find kinship and to sell their secondhand goods and whatever. And there is this duality to social media, and people who just kind of decry social media is bad, and people opinions I don't like should be stricken from the record, and this is a kind of a two-dimensional view of the world. But when you start hiding harms, minimizing control against those harms, conspiring with foreign governments in a way that may leak, sensitive data from the Western world, these are crossing a line. And as I said, should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
We'll see what happens. It's just a tough situation in general, right? Because it's really something more for government. I think government in general has had a lot of difficulty dealing with the fast-moving, complex nature of technology threats to society. And, without putting too fine a point on it, I think that the current regime in the US is uniquely unsuited to dealing with this.
This is the other point I've always made when I've been the defender of Facebook is, is the point you made earlier, which is a well-functioning government is supposed to regulate and monitor and pass laws about what is disinformation, misinformation, about what rises to the level of hate crime and all this. So it's up to the Congress to define many of these guardrails for society, and for these companies to not take the role of social curator or arbiter. Now, it sounds like I'm making the Elon Musk argument, and I'm not, because he's an absolutist and he has no taste, and he's also a hypocrite. I'm just saying there's more for the government to have done here. I always wince when I see them, raking Mark Zuckerberg over the coals, and also making fun of his affect. People making fun of his, he's robotic and he's not even human. And I just think all of this is just crossing the line when there's no self-awareness on that stuff.